Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to the Library Tour of Doom, to which Lord Ganesh and I are subjecting you as we go through every book in my library, every ebook in my library, and every book that's ever been in my library. One book at a time, day by day, until the trump of doom. Today, we have an oldie that's not in print and will never be in print again. You might be able to get it free on Project Gutenberg. I haven't actually checked. This is The Vanished Pomps of Yesterday by Lord Frederick Hamilton. I believe this is a sequel. It was really popular. It did really good business in bookshops, and so did the one before it. I forget. I think the one that came before it was called Here, There, and Everywhere. And these are his memoirs of being in diplomatic service all over the Western world in the years immediately prior to World War One. Where later on in life he decided to look back and tell his favorite stories, all the people that he met, all the places that he went to, all the things that he saw. And he hit a nerve. People liked it. They bought, the first book was popular, and so was this one. Totally forgotten now, of course. As is Lord Frederick Hamilton, who was the sixth son of a duke. If you're the sixth son of a duke, then maybe, just maybe, if your father has been prudent in his investments, you might get an allowance of some kind or other, but you're not going to get anything else. You'd be lucky if you get that. Typically speaking, the heir will be brought up in the management of the estates and the expansion thereof and the businesses and whatnot, and maybe the son right after the heir might get a little bit of that training too, and a bit more of an update, a bit more of an upkeep. The heir, for instance, would have a home of his own, would be given a home of his own, one of the houses that was owned by the duke. But the sixth son, no. After a while, once the line starts attenuating like that, occupations need to be found for these sons: the military, the clergy. If you want to bring a little disgrace on your family, maybe the literary world. And the diplomatic service was one of those places. It was a popular place to find the sons of the aristocracy, the minor, lesser sons of aristocracy. And Lord Frederick Hamilton is a fantastic storyteller. He's got a sharp writing style. So I understand why these books were so popular. I found this copy, of course, at the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston. And I am confident that sooner or later, the Brattle will provide. Sooner or later, I will find a copy of the first book in this series too. I know I would like it because I love this one. I read this a couple of times. It's absolutely fascinating. He went to, it's fascinating in a little bit of a frustrating way, because in this particular book, he talks about his time at the legations of Prussia, Germany, and Russia in the pre-war days. And he talks about them in a kind of Colonel Blimp style of, isn't it a pity that those grand soirees and levees and parties are no longer possible, because all three of those kingdoms were wrecked by World War I. When yeah, they were, but that's not actually the worst thing that happened as a result of that war. I understand you have fond memories. You look back on those things and think that some pretty things were destroyed, but it always reminds me of a movie critic who was lambasting Pearl Harbor, the movie Pearl Harbor with Ben Affleck and Josh Hartnett, where the love interest, Liv Ullmann, was it? Or Liv Tyler? It was Liv Tyler, I think. One way or another, the love interest says to one of those two guys, interchangeable tobacco addicts, that everything was going just fine until all this happened. And what she means by that is the war, is the U.S. entry into World War II. And that's the same feeling that you get, a little chuckle here. At his lordship, sort of mistily reminiscing on how wonderful these days were, the pre-war days. And isn't it a shame that Prussia doesn't still have its legation parties every year? One way or another, in the course of his reminiscences, he gives fantastic pen portraits of everybody that he meets, and of all of the atmosphere. And he's quite right in thinking that a lot of that atmosphere would disappear, had been swept away by the war, or would be swept away soon afterwards. He's right in thinking that. So books like this have a value that's out of proportion to how trivial they are. Very much so. For instance, he talks about Bismarck when he was at the Prussian legacy, at the delegation. Bismarck used to come by after work hours to just hang out. The author got to spend quiet, casual conversation time with Otto von Bismarck, who liked the English legation because all of the delegates had been trained and got their position because of their fluency in German. And Bismarck was, among many other things, a crackpot ultranationalist who at one point, and it's described in this book, at one point in a fit of pique, he insisted that all diplomatic communications going out of Germany or coming into Germany had to be in German. and naturally, this put everybody, all other countries, on an odd hop, on an odd foot. The language of the day was French. The international language of the day was French. And Hamilton tells a story in here of how an urgent communique came from Russia in Russian and was ignored at Bismarck's order. And when a Russian delegate came up to him and said, well, basically, did you get my email? Bismarck rather pompously said, well, no one here could, it seemed to be in a strange language and no one here could decipher it. I put it away till I could find an expert who could decipher it, which I'm sure will happen in a few months. I trust it wasn't anything urgent. And Hamilton tells us that after that, you could be sure that no more communiques came from Russia in Russian. They all came in German. But he also adds a little point that, of course, we, meaning the British embassy, always sent all of our communiques in English. But he talks about his time talking with Bismarck, and he got to know, not only by reputation, but also personally, a couple of Bismarck's sons, and he describes them. He describes the oldest boy, Herbert Bismarck, as hated, universally hated by everybody. But then he talks about the second son. This paragraph, it's a brief, but it gives you an idea of the kind of figure this author is on the page, and you just get page after page after page of this kind of thing. This goes on for 400 pages. The second son, William, universally known as Bill, was a genial, fair-headed giant of a man, as generously popular as his elder brother was the reverse. Bill Bismarck, the juxtaposition of these two names always struck me as being comically incongruous. Drank so much beer that his hands were always wet and clammy. He told me himself that he always had 3 bottles of beer placed by his bedside lest he should be thirsty in the night. He did not live long. And it just keeps going like that. And the thing is, you read books like this. I get a steady supply of these things because of the wonder of the Brattle Bookshop. These things show up where they don't show up in a lot of other used bookstores. And the thing about them that always strikes me, that always thrills me, is probably thrilling the history fans that are listening to this now. This is the kind of stuff that gets left out of the big sweeping narrative histories from which these primary documents are made. And it's in books like this where you see all of these big people doing little things. You get to see them in their daily life. It's true on every level. The memoirs like these, diplomatic memoirs, used to be a big vogue. They aren't done anymore, but they used to be. And they have priceless mines of information in them. You just have to have the patience to sift through them, because there's a lot of stuff in them that's not of use to anybody, unless you have the luck to encounter a book written by such a raconteur. Lord Frederick Hamilton was a raconteur. He knew these stories were good, and he was proven right. These books were popular. They sold. I don't know how much else that he wrote. I don't think he did much else with his life. Let's just say he didn't produce anything like an heir. He wasn't that way inclined. Not that it would have mattered anyway, since he had brothers he had older siblings who were producing heirs. Nevertheless, it's good that he had a talent here. And this is a fun book to revisit. Talk about vanished pomps of yesteryear. He captures the sunlight, the rainy days, the hunger, the iniquities of travel. He captures all those things the way they were. And they're long gone. And they're often not present in big sweeping books that have more weighty things to do, that have bigger stories to tell. They're often not present. If you, like me, are diehard interested in all of history, not just the big narrative, but the integumentary tissue, when things like this are catnip, absolute catnip. And the thing that bothers me about them, of course, is that most readers don't have access to a shop like the Brattle that gets these things and sells them for $1. So most people, even diehard history fans, don't get access to these things. They can't read and enjoy them. You can do it vicariously through me. in this particular instance, in the Library Tour of Doom, and there'll be other old, 150-year-old books that are long gone. but not for today. We're only doing one book today, so I'm going to wrap this up so that these library tours of doom don't become 30-minute videos in their own right. If you are watching this video and you are fairly new to this channel and you're thinking, well, all of his other videos are 30 minutes long, and listening to this one, it sounds like he knows a lot about this author. It sounds like he could go on for 30 minutes about this book. You are correct, but I'm not going to. I'm going to exercise restraint. So I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.